like a Hellcat.
Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another Sega Saturn review, and this week's game I felt could only be one game, and I'm talking about the sequel to last week's game, NBA Action. So of course I'm talking about NBA Action 98, which saw release in October of 1997 over in North America and was followed by a November 97 release over here in the PAL region. Now, I do want to point out that when I've taken a look at sequels in the past, they've all tended to do quite well and improve on the previous games in the series in some way or another. Games like Street Fighter Alpha 2, Panzer Dragoons Vi, Virtua Cop 2, and even Worldwide Soccer 98 have all surpassed the previous games in the series in various ways. And when you take into account that the original NBA Action was a pretty good game in its own right, I feel NBA Action 98 has got a bit of a challenge this week if it wants to surpass the previous game in the series. So once the main menu comes around, you'll see that it looks very familiar to the previous game in the series. Exhibition, new season, new playoffs, practice mode, a new feature, game options, and player menu are your choices. Heading into the player menu, this is where you can do all of your things like creating and trading players, checking out lineups for the teams, checking out player profiles, and checking out the user records. Moving into the options menu, this is of course where you do all of your tweaking for all the various settings in the game. Quite similar to the last game, but there are a lot of options to tweak within the game. So once you head into the team selection, you'll see you've got all 29 NBA teams to pick from. They're all rated by their offense, defense, rebounding skills, and they're all given a ranking based on the previous year's performance in the NBA, which I think is really good. It gives you their win-loss record for the 96-97 Season 2, and it shows you the starting lineup for the team. So I think it's a really, really good presentation right from the get-go. So like always, we're going to start with visuals first, and to say that I was pleasantly surprised with NBA Action 98 in this area would be a huge understatement, because the developers have improved the game in pretty much every aspect. Visually, the players are of higher quality, there's more detail to them, they're clearer, the crowd are now fully animated and they look way better, and it adds more atmosphere to the game as well. The presentation for the way the players come onto the pitch as well, it's really, really good. They're all introduced individually and it adds a real authentic feel to the game as well. And as well as that, all of the courts look better, they're clearer and they're more detailed than the previous game in the series. As well as that, the video quality is higher and much better on this game than the previous game, and that isn't something that I can say about all Saturn games, because some Saturn games have really poor video quality, and thankfully NBA Action 98 is good in that area too. And finally, the animations for all of the moves in the games are even better than the first game too, and they've added more in, more different slam dunks. The game is visually impressive and the animations are impressive as well. I can't really say how surprised I was by this, with a Saturn game coming out in the latter half of 1997, especially a sports game, to have had this much effort put into it visually in terms of the presentation as well. If I was going to say anything negative, and it really is only a minor thing, I think some of the body shapes, I should say, are slightly misshaped. They don't quite look that realistic, especially when you see them in action replays. But thankfully, when you're actually playing a game, this isn't noticeable. So overall, in the visual department, NBA Action 98 does very well.
Heat have the ball. Ball in low. He fires a 2.
So moving on to the sound effects and music now, and if you watched my review of NBA Action last week, you'll know that I slammed the game for having really poor commentary. It was stiff, jilted, pretty incoherent, and brought absolutely no pleasure to hear whatsoever. But thankfully, the developers of NBA Action 98 put in a lot of effort to rectify this, because now we've got someone who speaks coherent sentences. He makes sense, and he is perfectly pleasant to listen to, which is a massive plus point. Yes, the sound quality comes like it's coming out of a 1960s radio, but I can forgive it because he actually says much more coherent things. Now, in terms of the actual sound effects within the games, they're just as good as the first game. They were a highlight in NBA Action because I felt they were really good, and they're just as good here. And in terms of the music as well, we've got a few musical tracks in the game, and they are perfectly befitting of a basketball game. I don't think music tends to be that important within sports games because we're really more about how they play and how enjoyable they are. But the music here is absolutely fine. So overall, in the sound effects and music, I feel NBA Action 98 does very well.
He fires a 2. That's all.
So moving on to the gameplay next, and I said last week that NBA Action was a decent playing game, but I'm happy to say that NBA Action 98 is actually a better playing game than that, and that mainly comes down to the fact that I feel this game is just that little bit smoother. I think it's easier to score slam dunks and layups on this game, and as a result you feel more satisfied when you're playing the game. Now, the main challenge in the gameplay is of course the defensive side of the game, and I said that last week with NBA Action. I feel if you're going to become really good at this game, you're going to have to practice blocking and trying to steal the ball, because that is where, for me, the challenge in the gameplay comes in. Now, there are a few tweaks as well, because you can turn between arcade or simulation. If you have arcade mode on, then the boundaries are off and the rules are simplified, and this is probably ideal if you're not a massive basketball nerd and you don't know all of the rules, and it means the game will just flow that little bit more. And as well as that, you can actually just control one player during a game as well, and that will be much more of a challenge because you're relying on your CPU teammates much more as well. So I feel there's plenty of gameplay tweaks as well. Of course, you've got tactical changes that you can do as well if you like that side of the game. It's a very, very in-depth game in terms of gameplay, just like the previous game was. I don't think anybody who was a basketball fan was going to complain with this game at all in terms of the way it plays and the depth as well.
Dribble drive. Packed with the easy layup.
So moving on to content and lifespan next, and the one thing I criticised the previous game for was having no practice mode, and I'm thankful to say that NBA Action 98 rectifies that by having a very simple practice mode where you take control of two players and you can simply practice the basic maneuvers to get used to the game. This is really good for someone like myself who doesn't play any basketball games. As well as that, the creator character is slightly better this time around because we've got more faces to choose from as well. You can edit the rosters just like last time too, and you can actually go through all of the player profiles for all of the players on the game too. Now, this will give certain people, especially basketball fans I should say, a sense of nostalgia, just being able to go through and check out all these profiles from the players that were in the 96 to 97 season of the NBA. As well as that, we've got our standard modes, exhibition, season mode, which can be a full season or a reduced season, or the playoff mode as well. And obviously the full season mode is your main bulk of lifespan because it will take a long time to play through, and in fact it will take an even longer time than the previous game, and that is for me because of the game's one flaw. One thing they did with NBA Action 98 is increase the minimum quarter time from 2 minutes up to 3 minutes. Now, that doesn't sound like a big difference, but when you add it together, that means a game is going to take a minimum of 12 minutes, and with all the stoppages and breaks that you have, probably the best part of 15 minutes, and for me, that is too long for one single game in a sports title. For me, when I play a sports title, I want a match or a game to last about 5 or 6 minutes, so I can burn through 4 or 5 in about 30-35 minutes and then turn it off. You can't do that with NBA Action 98 because the games take quite a long time to play through. So I do feel, whilst the game has pretty decent content, lots of statistical things for people to check out and get to know, the one thing that cripples it for me is the fact the game time is just too long, that I feel this game won't appeal to non-basketball fans.
And dunk.
Now that means we've got our two final questions. Is NBA Action still worth playing today, and does it feature in our Sega Saturn Top 10? Now, without a doubt, if you're a fan of basketball, especially from this time period, you will find a lot of enjoyment in this game because it is actually a really good basketball game that plays very, very well. If, like me, you're not a basketball fan, you will probably be put off by the fact the quarter lengths, I feel at 3 minutes at a minimum, are just that little bit too long. It means the games go for longer than I personally like, and this will probably put people off. Now, does it make the Sega Saturn top 10? Without a doubt, this is actually a quality game, and it's probably the second best sports game that I have looked at on the system. The only one it not being better than is Athlete Kings. That is how highly I think of this game. But at the end of the day, it is just another sports game, and it doesn't have the overall quality, in my opinion, to get into either the PAL top 10 or the worldwide top 10. Now, of course, these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone, and I always want to hear other people's views down below. So let me know in the comment down below what you think of NBA Action 98, and I will be back in the near future with another review. Goodbye for now.
Dribble drive. Johnson below.